Hey, what's up guys? It's Bronson. Now for this week's video, we have what seems visually impossible. We need to turn this tattoo into this. But stick around and find out how we can make cover-ups like this possible. And throughout the video, I'm going to be sharing some pro tips that you can apply into your own tattooing. But enough of all that, let's get into it. Okay guys, so here is a quick look at before we start our cover-up process. You can see that not only is this quite a big tattoo, but there is also some color aspects that we really need to get on top of and make sure that they're not showing through into our cover-up tattoo. Now a real pro tip for this video is really going to be when you're doing a cover-up, we really need to focus on some of this negative space that is left. We need to make the most of all of these pockets, and we need to fill these areas with light aspects on our new tattoo. Now I have decided to jump ahead a little bit in this tattoo. Since this is 2 days worth of footage, there was so much to show, and being based more on a cover-up tattoo, I wanted to make sure that that is the content that I'm giving you guys, tattooing in some of these more hectic areas and some more challenging aspects through this tattoo. So you can see I'm using the Fold Pro machine. This is on the 3.9mm stroke, and I'm running it at 7.8 volts. I find that works really nice. And I'm running 4 cartridges today, and those are from Metrix. So now let's get into this tattoo a little bit. You can see we're in quite a complicated area, but in my reference there are some vertical lines which are going to be perfect. They're kind of like a shadow put onto the portrait from the hair. So I'm able to just move some of these shadows over to where I need them a little bit more. Like in this area, I'm able to get through a lot of the existing tattoo by just shifting that shadow over a little bit. Now my cover-ups, I do really try and tattoo my reference exactly, and I try not to even think about the tattoo that's behind it. And then I come into some small challenges along the way and make some of these small decisions throughout the tattoo. And that also applies to my value that I want to use as well. As we know, it's really easy to put a darker value over an old tattoo to cover it, but I think it's really not needed. I would much rather find a value that I think is accurate, that can compete with the ink and the value that's already in the skin. Some of these opaque tones give you a huge advantage as well, because the pigment is a lot thicker. And also to avoid breaking any values that are true to my reference, I'm also able to apply texture or maybe put more noise visually into an area. So you can see some really great cover-ups that you might have seen in the past are really detailed, like almost 7-round liner, the whole tattoo. If you've got something really solid and really textured, you're going to be breaking any vertical or horizontal lines that are showing in your old tattoo. And just a dramatic visualization on that theory would be if I were to try and create a dark to light gradient on this arm, all of these lines would still show up. But as I create smaller pockets of detail, it starts to break up that existing shape and form that was there originally. And I guarantee that if you tattooed a realistic like rock or maybe a piece of pumice on someone's arm, it would cover the tattoo perfectly. But my client didn't want a piece of pumice tattooed on the arm, so they decided some realistic portraits would make my job heaps easier. So that's good. But let's talk about this tattoo a little bit. So I am getting into the sleeve of the male figure that's holding the gun here. So just mapping this in, And as you can see, I'm already a little bit through my day of tattooing, so it's getting to the point where I need to decide what I want to see completed in this first day session on this cover up. And also, it was never planned to do 2 days back to back, but my client did want to smash this out, so I just decided 2 days back to back is going to be better than coming back the following week, because we'll be quite far into the healing process. So you can do 2 days in a row, but with a large gap, things start to get a little bit too far healed, and you can run into some issues there. But like I was saying, it's pretty far through our tattoo session already, and it's getting to the point where I need to decide, am I going to push myself to finish this portrait, or am I going to take the easy route and kind of map in a bit of this gun and some other aspects? But yeah, I do like to always keep my clients as happy as I can, so I decided to knuckle into this portrait a little bit, and you can see that decision was made with a lot of these other aspects as well. So I decided to skip out on some of the outer aspects on that female portrait at the bottom there, and also some of the background aspects, really focusing on the heart of all of this detail in the main parts of the cover up. I really want to use all my time wisely, and then hopefully I'm just left with like a 3-hour session to smash in the background when this is all healed up on a later date. So here I also start mapping some of this hand in the gun, which isn't a decision that I would do if I knew I was doing the 2 days back to back. I would rather leave the area completely bare so that I can tattoo into that the following day without too much irritation in that area. But with this surprise 2 days back to back, yeah, I had to kind of go against that and tattoo right over some of these areas that I had tattooed the previous day. I did keep that in mind when I was tattooing it, but it's something that you really don't want to be doing, ideally. Another pro tip that I can share with you guys is don't let the existing tattoo push you into making decisions that are bad for the current tattoo. This is still your work that's going to be shown to other people. So the number one thing is always you need to create a good product for your client. Sure, it is unfair that we have to do that in these conditions with this kind of cover-up process, but it is what it is, so just get into it, really. So my first goal when sitting down and starting this tattoo is just to create my reference as true as I can. I don't focus on the existing tattoo and that layer behind my stencil. I just try and tattoo my reference well, and keeping this in mind as a main goal, make sure that my end result is solid. I'm not making any early mistakes and getting intimidated by the old tattoo, and not making any values too dark or changing the shape of my forms to try and cover this old tattoo. I'm just trusting the process with the skills that I have. So now moving on to this portrait here, I'm just putting in some of this early mapping with my 13 round mag and a light-ish tone. Just really starting to get some basic forms mapped in so I can start building up some of these forms and making some of these shadows true. So after I've got that early mapping in, I do jump straight to a black value so that I can start to really structure this piece, working my way up from this collar of the shirt and onto the portrait, and just starting with some of these jawline shadows as well onto the portrait, getting some dark values mapped in above and below this area before I start to fully saturate. So here's some real-time footage of that hand speed. And with these cover-ups, I do really like to heavily saturate. It may not be in one pass, but overall some of these areas are getting tattooed like 3 or 4 times, brushed over. Now just some more mapping with this 13 round mag. It's a great way to get in this detail just nice and soft. I don't want any of these values to be lined in and look so harsh that this becomes some kind of lined out portrait. And even sometimes when you're gentle with these liners, they can just put things in too harsh. And now with a 7 round liner extra tight, I'm putting in some more accurate darker values. Now this here is not my true black. This is my dark value dipped into my black just to get a early mapping, and I also am using a dark opaque, which I usually don't, but I do really want to utilize all the opaque values that I have to help with this cover up. I know that I need a thicker pigment to push over some of these old values with the old tattoo. And now just lining out these sunglasses, just with a light value here, really just scratching this in, almost like a bloodline here. Just getting that mapped in so that I can keep focusing on this lower area. Now passing through with a true black, just nice slow passes, making sure that that's really solid. And it's funny, that's actually been a huge thing that I've been focusing on lately, is making sure that my black value is as solid as I can make it. I really want that to be really tightly packed, because it's these two values, the contrast between your darkest black and also your highlight of the white ink, that is going to create the trueness of your palette. So if any of these values are out of whack, I feel like it's really hard to work a realistic portrait. If your black value isn't where it should be, then visually your whole artistic palette is off when you're trying to create this piece of art. But you can see here, back to the 13 round mag, and I'm just putting in some of these darker midtones and just starting to define and make some of these shadows a little bit more permanent. I'm really taking my time to work out these shadows where they're drifting off to the highlight side of the portrait, making sure to not make any really permanent decisions early on in this tattoo. I'm making the most of my light and midtones to get a good idea of mapping in this portrait. And also you can see there's not a lot of information left on my stencil. This isn't really an issue for me, as I do paint a lot without stencils, and obviously I tattoo a lot. So losing stencil information really isn't too much of an issue for me, especially with portraits and really any realism aspect. And it's a really fun and rewarding stage to be at in your career when you're able to take on any portrait stress-free. And if you're a realistic artist, then that's probably something that you aspire to be like if you're not already there. And some ways to fast track that is really from painting and drawing more. It's just like anything, the more that you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be there and the better result that you're going to be able to make. But now getting back to the tattoo, we're pretty far through these glasses now. I've mapped a little bit up from that into the eyebrows as well. So getting in some of these black values, and like I was talking about earlier, if anything, I want to overpack this black. I want it to be super saturated. And also look at how nice these values are that are mixed with the opaque. Such a nice dark thicker value than would appear with your normal grey wash. I really enjoy mixing the whitewash with these opaques. I think that the look that it gives is so nice, and I always excelled with my color tattoos quite early on, and it took a long time for my black and grey to catch up to my color work. I think that this medium of using the opaques with my whitewash is bringing me a little bit closer to naturally how I want to be working with this kind of color and painting mindset that I have. I think it really helps me to be a little bit closer to that, and just helping to adapt these tools for how I want to work. So before I start saturating and finalizing any of these details and values in this portrait, I've decided to move up and finish some of these easier and more anchoring aspects. So moving right up to the hair, finishing that area with that dark, because I also don't want to contaminate any whites that I'm going to be using in this portrait. Being a cover up, I really want to fully saturate this portrait up to my highest white value, leaving no skin, so that I'm going to have the best chance of a good looking cover up. Now I'm going to change this camera angle here to give you guys the best view at what's going on and the detail and precision that I'm able to get in with these mags. So here you can really see the size of the piece. This is a 13 round mag that, as it sits on the portrait, takes up a good portion of it. So I really have to be careful and just using the edge of it. but it really is such a good tool and probably my favorite cartridge to use. Just like a painter has their favorite brushes, a 13 round mag is definitely my favorite needle. It's so versatile on how you're able to use it, from saturating or creating a gradient, and then also putting in some harsher, even lines, or some sharper textures. And using one needle a lot, I find really helps to keep your artistic flow on the piece up and going. I don't have to change needles and then create that same value again. And you can see here with a darker value starting to saturate in the side and shadow on the side of the portrait, and starting to create this gradient and some of these finer details as well. And it's great when your portrait's at this stage. I've finished the glasses and the hair, so it's allowing me to really just focus on working my way back up and through some of these finer details on the portrait. And you can really see the amount of times that I'm passing over the same area with these opaque styled values to really saturate this well and create quite a thick pigment in the skin that's going to easily cover up anything that's behind it. And this is a little bit of a process, and it is more like how I tattoo color. My first pass might just be creating the form and direction of my gradient or shadow, and then I'll start getting through with more of these true values and really starting to pack it on my form where that value might be, working through my range of values in my palette. And just like a painting as well, I'm really wanting to try and focus from a dark to light. By the time I get to my lightest value or my whites, the portrait should be almost complete. And there's some really nice shadows in this portrait, so it really is making for an easy cover up and a good distraction for any values that are behind it. You can see even with some of these lines on the forehead of the portrait or on the chin there is also a line there. As long as I break that up with a form close enough to it that's a little bit dark, and then perhaps some small hard hits of white directly over that line that needs to be covered up, then that's all we need to distract the viewer's eye from seeing that existing line. And with doing it that way, I don't have to risk any values in my reference or form in the reference's shapes. And it can be hard to visualize this early on in your tattoo, but you really do need to trust the tools that you have and your end goal of the tattoo. Trusting that your values and what you're doing throughout this tattoo is going to be enough to create that cover up. Rather than doubting yourself early on and putting on shadows that are too dark or changing your form to cover up the old tattoo better, a cover up still shouldn't be any excuse to create a bad tattoo. You still need to create your reference as true and as good as you can, and really you're just using a little bit more knowledge and some tricks to help cover up this old tattoo. Now, just like a lot of tattoo styles, we want to ease into doing these cover-ups. If this is your first tattoo cover-up that you take on, you want to make sure that it's perhaps something small. Fine line is great for just blasting over and building up that confidence that whatever you tattoo is going to go over that. Of course, with some slight problem solving along the way. And now I've got some smaller details here of the face tattoo of my client's partner. So just putting that in, and I'm using a 3 round liner here just to make sure that that is super sharp. And now we're going to start moving on to finishing some more of these facial features and finalizing some of these values. So now I'm really in the darker end of my values, putting in some of these true blacks and really dark values to really help anchor some of these forms and create that true value for my healed result. And it's really not very often that I use this 9 round mag, but it is great for these small solid hits, a little bit harsher than the 13 round mag. So yeah, I do find it quite nice for really some of these final stages on adding sharpness to areas. And here I do also want to create a sharper line from the foreground and the background at the top of that portrait there. So you could see I was running over that with a 7 round shader to make sure that it wasn't just a magged in line. I did want to create a really harsh edge, as there's quite a bit of light behind the portrait there. So now I just need to finish some of these shadows up, getting that final form locked in, and tattooing this ear as well before I can move on to my lighter values, because I really don't want to risk any contamination of my whites or even my lighter values here. Being a cover up, I really need to use every tool I have to make a good contrasted result. So here I'm actually using a off-white. So I decided to dip into my white and then into my light opaque a little bit and then back into the white, just to create something that's going to be a highlight that sits in the skin, but it's a little bit under my highest white value. So again, just giving myself a little bit of a variable there, allowing me to saturate the skin even more. And these mags also pack values in so well. I really find it so much better. I'm not sure if it's like my hand speed or my technique, but naturally, mags I can really punch things in so much more. And for white, sometimes even more than my round shaders or my round liners. Sometimes I find that my round shader or round liner, I'll get a little bit of redness in my white, and quite often that's due to a lack of pigment in your cartridge or what's being pushed into the skin. You end up seeing more irritation rather than a well saturated area. But now we are on to the high whites of this tattoo, so I do end up using my 7 brown liner extra tight from Metrix, and this is really, I'm trying to achieve my highest level of saturation and also my highest level of sharpness. Really taking my time with a slower hand speed to ensure that this is packed in well on my first pass. And also pushing a little bit of this background, finalizing some of that to help pop off this portrait. You can see with a quick wipe there, the portrait is definitely on the way. It's looking really nice. And again, like I was talking about earlier in this piece, I really want this portrait to stand out from my background. So I'm using some tools to do that by sharpening up my edges. On the top of the portrait, I have that hairline blacked in a little bit to help lift that forward, and then my background as well is a white edge around the portrait. So that's really the strongest tools that you can use to bring something forward in your tattoo, is just creating a sharp contrast. And I'll just include a little bit of the white down in this tattoo as well, just because this eye does actually look super nice. I was really happy with that as well. And here again, just using that 7 round liner extra tight to put in some smaller and sharper hits of white. I find that these small, really sharp hits of white naturally create that almost hyper realistic look, which is nice when the eye is this size or bigger really, to pull in that extra detail. If you've got the space in your portrait to do that, yeah, it is a really nice effect. Especially these small little hits just on the start of the eyelash there, kind of contrasting from some of these longer white shapes into some of these smaller hits is a really nice effect. Now on to magging in some of these whites. It's usually not something that I'll do for my portraits, although I do love the look of a fully saturated piece. I currently enjoy having a little bit of negative space left in the tattoo. But that might change down the line. It is kind of an artistic preference thing. And whenever you are planning to fully saturate like this, it is really good to have that in mind early on in your tattoo and heavily saturate all these areas. So for the hair, you're able to almost apply white in these very minimum negative spaces that are left. Whereas if you don't fully saturate, sometimes you're used to leaving that area clear, and then when you use your white, it won't have that same effect as if it was a small hit surrounded by a lot of saturation and darker values. So now, just with a few white hits left, we're on to the finished result of day 1. And I was really happy with this result. It's great to see that my process and planning is really going to work for this cover up. I don't need to make any changes to my value or techniques throughout this tattoo. And most importantly, I've still been able to create a good product for my client. That really is the main thing and my main stress when someone comes to me for a cover up. I can't just give them a piece that's covering the old tattoo. I still need to make a product that I'm happy with. So here we are setting up for day 2. Now it was decided as we finished day 1 that yeah, she really wanted to see a little bit more of this done if she could, so I was able to move my client. Thanks for the bro for moving for that. And then we were able to chip away at it some more with this other day, and I was also pretty excited. Like, I was happy with how this was going, so I was pretty excited to get some more work done on this. But if I had planned this as 2 days, I would have started with the work higher than where I'm working now. So I'm able to work from the top of the piece down, because now for this whole day I have to be wiping over the tattoo, and also keeping in mind I need to be a little bit careful of these white highlights that I put in the day before. I still think that they could get contaminated the following day with a black value or something that could muddy it. Now sometimes it is just a visual thing that really is on the surface of the tattoo and it won't heal that way. But I don't want to take any risks like that, especially after working so hard to create a good portrait the day before. And I feel like for the level of work that was done yesterday, like I got quite a bit done, you know, finishing 2 portraits, a little bit of the surrounding aspects, and just for that level of saturation, it is really time consuming. I think a normal tattoo would have been a lot quicker than saturating the skin so much and working up those values like that. But you can see here I am starting to work in some of these surrounding shadows of this hand and create some of these forms here and shadows to start building up my levels of saturation and values to push these gradients through and complete all of these areas. Now don't worry, there isn't too much more that I show in this video. I really just want to show completing a little bit more of this piece and not so much of what is above it. I didn't want to create a video that was too long and just repeating the same kind of steps over and over. I've seen the stats on my YouTube videos that shows your guys' retention, and although you guys might say that you want a long video in the comments, the stats don't lie, man. I think you guys might view like the first 10 minutes or something, but I suppose those people are already gone technically. Hey, we're like 20 something minutes in, so shout out to all you guys still watching it. You guys are the real MVP. Anyone else that has stopped watching this video already, man, I don't know about you guys, eh? So mapping in some of these darker shadows with my 13 round mag, and really just, yeah, creating a little bit of form for me to start building off. And like I was talking about at the start of the video, I really want my darker values to be packed so solid so that all my values appear true to my reference. And there's a great effect at play here with the hand. All of our focus is on the portrait, and this hand is really nice and blurred. I'm such a big fan of a lot of contrast in my tattoo, not just lying in my values, but I want dramatic effects in my tattoos to help really tell and sell the story to the viewer. And it's quite often that a dramatic effect in a tattoo is what brings that true vision of realism to life, even more so than tattooing your reference well. It's not always the portrait that's the star of the show. Sometimes it's the other effects and contrasting factors at play that really help to make your work pop and look realistic. But something else happened this week at work. Like, I've had such a busy few weeks. That's why I've been struggling to post a little bit. Honestly, I've just been like flat out again, working like a little bit later than I normally do even. With really cool pieces, and I've been doing a lot of filming, which is nice. so I've got a lot of content banked for when I do have more time. But this week one of the boys tried out the power, oh no, not the power wand, I think it's just the OG Bishop wand, the Packer machine. And hearing the performance, I didn't try it, but I could see one of my colleagues using it, and I could hear the machine as well and kind of see what it was doing. It didn't blow me away, like looking at what was going on. I didn't even need to use the machine. Now I'm talking about this because I really wanted to try the power wand Packer that Bishop has. For the last year now, I keep on adding it to my basket online, but I just haven't committed to spending so much on a machine. But in my head, it's always been like a leading tattoo machine. But I guess someone just needs to let me know in the comments, is the power wand better than the OG wand? And I don't just mean the wireless capabilities, I mean, is this machine a lot smoother and having a bit of a different hit to that OG wand? Because yeah, I wasn't really sold on the performance of the OG wand, and I definitely don't think that it beats the Fold Pro. Now back to the tattoo. Obviously, as you guys can see, I've skipped through this part of the tattoo. It is really quite easy. There's no real hard work going on with this top part of the tattoo. Maybe the car's a little bit, like that's quite nice. But yeah, I didn't want this video to be too long for you guys. I just wanted it to show a little bit of the heart of this cover up. There is still a lot of background to add on the side of this tattoo at a later stage, but that will also be really easy. But it will add a really nice effect to the tattoo and help the eye really view all this nice work that we put center on the arm. The outside background, I think, will just be some quite dark values, really simple forms, and I'll just really be doing all of that to really help bring in that focus to this nice work that we've done. So now let's have a look what 2 days of back-to-back tattooing can achieve with this cover-up tattoo. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I really appreciate everyone's ongoing support. Now I can already see the comment section of this video blowing up on everyone perhaps thinking that this piece isn't going to heal well. Now this tattoo will not magically disappear. The only thing I may need to do is apply some really harsh whites with a liner over any lines that are showing through from the old tattoo. But make sure that you hit the like button, that you are subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.